to my next installment of FDM017-Femme, Mystique, the podcast centered around discovering female dominance and the power exchange that goes with it. I'm your hostess, Mistress Simone, also known as Chicago Mistress, and I'm here with one of my good friends, Mistress Alexandra Sadista.
Hello, everyone.
It is nice to have you here.
I am happy to be here.
We've been having a very fun weekend.
Yes, we have.
Gracing my dungeon with your presence. Thank you very much.
It's been a ton of fun. It's a great dungeon. It's a fun place to play.
Oh, thank you.
As I expected it to
be. So I'd like to start out with a basic question for my readers to get to know you a little bit. If you could describe how you got started in female dominance.
Sure. So I will start with the professional domination side, which was about roughly 10 years ago that I began. And right before then, 6 months before I decided to go just dive into the commercial space and all that stuff, I became a lifestyle slave. And so I served a male master. The male master lived with his girlfriend, who was his slave, and she was a pro-dom as well. And I basically did it with the mindset of wanting to observe and also feel what it was like to be submissive, to submit, to just basically have the approach where I knew what it was going to be to feel what it was like.
Okay. Did the male master know that this was the goal?
He did.
Okay.
He did. So I was new to the experience. I wanted to feel what it was like to feel the implements, to know how it was going to affect me emotionally, psychologically. And after 6 months of doing a lot of observing, we had long conversations about every little detail, which was great. I realized that it wasn't the place for me as a submissive.
Which is how often a lot of people start.
Exactly.
In the lifestyle, it's very common to start. And I know there are a few houses that the ladies have to start as a submissive to learn the same thing.
Sure.
And then move their way up and train, so to speak. So
Sure. And you don't see that much anymore. I've learned about a lot of more so current dominas who decide that they just want to dive into the dominant role, and that's just fine. But I just like to experience a little bit so I can learn what my reactions are like and try and gauge what my client or submissive's reactions are going to be like as well.
Correct.
So that happened, and I, at that time, was forming a friendship with Mistress GM Mays, who had a decent background she was in New York City and had a high position at Rapture. So she basically took me on as a professional domina, trained me, also allowed me to help her with a lot of the managerial aspect. I became her right-hand man.
All right.
And I learned a lot.
Was that in New York or was that here?
That was here.
In Chicago?
That was
right. So that was when she moved to Chicago.
Mistresses.
All right.
That was that.
All right.
So we did that. I did that with her for roughly 6 to 8 months before I decided that I wanted to try being an independent and seeing what that was about. I liked the idea. The reason why I wanted to go in that direction is that I didn't want to be on a set schedule. I like the idea of being responsible for a lot of tasks, but I prefer them to be tasks that will benefit in the long term my career as a domina.
Of course.
So just be in charge of myself.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that is the primary reason why I left. And I decided to rent from a lady who is at this point retired, who I've known for a long time, and somebody that I respect. And I was able to learn a completely different set of skill sets, different ways to handle my business through her, which I appreciate. And then, of course, I met you. Ta-da! And, I also like the idea of surrounding myself around people that make me feel inspired.
Of course.
And motivated.
Because it motivates you. Exactly.
So I feel like I've learned a lot by the choices that I've made in terms of the route that I wanted to take to when I wanted to be independent.
Sounds like you had it planned out and you
more or
kind of
less
knew what you were going for and how you wanted to do it, and every step took you closer to your goal.
Exactly.
Many of us long-term career ladies start out in group settings in houses and learn the basics and learn the skills and then move on to be independent if we're going to last a long time in the industry. Now, it's more common nowadays, I find, for people to start independent and stay independent because there's so many spaces across the nation that are renters, that are rental dungeons, instead of houses. When I started as a dom, there was no such thing really as a rental situation. It was all houses. You worked for the house, you were independent, and you had your own space.
Sure.
So rental space dungeon is kind of new within, I'd say, the last 10 years.
Okay.
So, something that shows the industry is changing. So I wanted to touch back on something you had mentioned within the conversation you just said. And you discussed that your male master had a female slave submissive who was also a pro-dom.
Correct.
A lot of myth goes around that. And I have had a lot of male clients and people who, even lifestylers who come up and say, oh, well, all pro-doms are actually female submissives, and they're just made to do it. I don't know, have you heard that, and what is your experience with that?
It hasn't been... So I have kept a lot of that side of me. I haven't published it. I haven't really... nobody is really aware that I was a slave back then, that I started off as that. My current clients and my regulars. So it wasn't until there was maybe a photo that came up that where I'm wearing a collar, where I'm doing some sort of performance, which I was going to backtrack and say that I started in performance art, which led me to BDSM and becoming a pro.
It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, it is. Very theatrical.
Very theatrical. Very similar.
So it wasn't until recently that somebody saw me in that environment as a submissive on a stage that I realized, aside from, yes, I've heard that myth, but somebody approached me and said, now I completely see you as a different person because I saw you in a submissive role and you were not the dominant that I thought.
Exactly.
You were. And, I think it's silly to just label somebody as one thing. I get that it's a fantasy to a lot of people. And if you want to keep, that kind of compartmentalized and you want to say, okay, I'm going to see you as a client and we're only going to have these interactions and I'm going to be your fantasy, and I get all of that. But you have to go beyond a person being one-dimensional.
Exactly. And I think that you touched on an important fact there on one-dimensional, is that because of our business that we are sometimes seen as very one-dimensional. Yes. And they have an image of us in their head, and if we break that image or anything interferes with that image, like, we're possibly switches, we have partners, we're bisexual.
Right.
Even sometimes the TV that we like and the books and movies that we like, that makes us a little bit less one-dimensional.
The porn that we like.
The porn that we like, the music we like.
Right.
Like, I never expected you to like that.
Right.
So they have a figment of their imagination, I kind of say, a figment of how we are.
Sure.
And if we break out of that, or they all of a sudden realize that we're humans, it can kind of destroy that fantasy world for them.
Exactly.
And create some issues.
Right. Because it's fine for them to be humans in every which way and how we deal with them, but when we are all of a sudden human, it changes everything. Right. It can.
Right. And that it can be very difficult and pressure for us to perform.
Sure.
And live up to that fantasy of, we're not supposed to get sick, we're not supposed to have deaths in our family, we're not supposed to love, how many doms do you know that are big softies?
Right.
And especially for anything that has fur and 4 paws.
Or
babies, kids.
Sure.
So it does kind of affect the way we have to interact with people.
Right. Which I think is why I appreciate the being in the lifestyle. I'm not in the lifestyle, say, as much as you are in the lifestyle. But having a foot in that side, it allows me to be more than just the dominant, than have this expectation that I'm just going to be this person. I get to be more of, okay, well, now you're going to see a little bit more about my life. You're going to see a little bit more about who I am, and this is what you have to deal with. There's more to me.
I'm a whole person. I'm human first.
Right.
BDSM second.
Exactly.
That's the way I always put it.
Sure.
We all get colds. We all have issues. We all have bills to pay. Things that we have to deal with.
Right.
No. So when someone wants to serve you personally, and it could possibly take that step to change the way they view you, what are some of the processes you go through to prepare them for that?
Well, lately, what I've learned, so I've had I've had about a handful of devoted submissives that I consider on the border of personal or full-on personal. And obviously you learn as you go.
You do.
So my approach now is I ask them exactly what they want, what they are seeking in terms of expectations, because submissives are allowed to have expectations. It's being realistic. I ask them how they want to feel, what kind of fulfillment they want to get out of it. You know, what kind of satisfaction and what.
And you're not talking just an orgasm.
Correct.
And getting your rocks off.
Correct. Or just being in my presence.
Right. I just want to be with you, goddess.
Exactly.
All right.
So, and I have to, sometimes in some cases, force them to look at themselves and see what is really going to make them happy in the long run. I then figure out if, based on their information that they give me, and based on how I read them and observe them, I think about if it's something that is realistic to me that I can offer them in return.
Correct.
And if they are also understanding, if we get past that point, when we get past that point, understanding then what it means to me to have my ideal submissive and what I expect, my expectations on them. So I gather information from them first, and then I give them the information that, here are my demands, here are my requirements, that sort of thing.
See if you mesh.
Right. Because at this point, obviously, it's somebody that I've already played with for, 1, 2, 3 years. So we already know each other in that environment. So I think about, or I express to them that I want to make sure that they're aware of my passions, that they are there to enhance my lifestyle.
Correct.
That they are there to serve me in ways that they never imagined before.
Like vacuuming.
Exactly. They're not so fun. You're going to run errands. You're going to fix my shoes. And yes, all that stuff, the mundane stuff.
Yes, you're going to take my dry cleaning in. And
exactly.
And that's great for a service person.
Sure.
Someone who, gets that satisfaction of, doing things and seeing how much it enhances your life.
Right.
But if they're not a service person, or if they're a different kind of service submissive, they may not feel fulfilled.
Right. Which, again, over the course of time, I've realized that people they're going to have their limitations as to how they can serve. There's different capacities. So, and sometimes they have a hard time understanding when I tell them, this is what you are good for, and I really appreciate this about you, but you are not meant to be this kind of slave. And that's perfectly fine, because this other person is. So,
but, and I have run across this in a few of those that have been collared to me over the years, is that they think that they should be able to do everything.
Right.
And not everyone can do everything.
Right. In a perfect world, but this is not a perfect world. In a perfect world, yeah, I would want my submissive to be able to travel with me all the time, to be at my beck and call, to own the house next door to me.
Be a 4-star chef.
Exactly.
A world-class cleaner, know how to dust.
All that good stuff.
Repair cars.
Right.
Work on leather.
Right. All that
Mechanic.
good stuff.
I mean, I don't say that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not everyone is going to be able to, there's no person that's going to be able to take on all those roles.
Right. So you can't have false expectations about, yourself or what I expect. So I have, I've realized, and I try to maximize, each person's potential, and just make them know that they're going to be challenged. My training process is 1.5 to 2 years before you become collared, because that is something, at that point, it's something that I take very, very seriously. I mean, through the whole process, but once I own you, once you are my property, then it's a sacred thing.
Of course. It's like a commitment, any commitment where there's two people and there's a connection and a power exchange, from being domestic partners to being life partners, marriage.
Exactly.
However you want to define your relationship, this is another commitment like that.
Exactly.
Do you feel that you have to collar all of those that are in service to you?
No.
Because I don't.
And a lot of them don't want that as
right.
well.
Exactly. You don't need to, there's not everyone who you have that level of connection with.
Right.
I think in my life I've collared maybe, I'm going to remember those that I've collared, 5 males and females over 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
See, that's why I love hanging out with you, because I love learning all of these things about you. And I think, there's somebody like you who's very much into the lifestyle side of things, and who, I feel like I hold a lot of the same values that you do. And
we're very similar in that area.
Yes. And there's the slave, or the wannabe slave, who sees photos of these women that are guiding their boys around in a leash and collar, or that are obviously they have as collared slave because he's standing there behind her with a collar,
right, on all the porn sites and the cam
sites,
and
exactly.
Clip sites.
So they don't have a clear understanding of what that means. They just see where they feel they want to be. And
you're going to be kept naked in a cage, eating out of a dog
sleeping at the foot of my bed,
sleeping at the foot of my bed.
My foot. No, that's no.
All the time you're going to be naked in leather, and I'm going to use and abuse you however I want. And I'm not going to say that does not happen, because it does, but it is very, very rare.
Right.
And it's usually not for an extent. I have found it is usually not here in the United States in an extended time period.
Sure.
We don't have the capability in our society to necessarily do that. We have to work. We have to have homes. It does happen, but it's very rare.
Sure.
I don't have a guy locked in the basement right now.
You don't?
I know.
What was that screaming I heard in the morning?
Shoot, that was my husband being woken up. So. Yeah,
it's definitely, and I feel like with some of the events that I've attended in Chicago, especially when I was starting out, and I wanted to just get a feel of what the scene was like. I noticed a lot of younger doms, with their boys for the night,
right,
leash and collar, and I've had various people say, that's what I want. I want to be owned just like that person, and I want to feel, all these things. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're willing to put all the work into it,
right?
So
correct. You want the fantasy. Again, we go back to the fantasy world. You want the fantasy. You want the image. You want the look.
Right.
But you don't want to do the work to get to that. And it's not going to be constant.
Right.
You can ask, Brenna, you can ask Mark, any of, the slaves that I do have, those both collared and uncollared, that there is a basic realistic factor to this.
Sure.
Brenna comes over and helps me with my landscaping. Mark has done painting. And that's something like, what does ma'am need to make her life a little bit more enjoyable that I can give her, that I can help her with?
Sure.
And at the same time, we have great play. And that's another thing I found is when you're doing 24/7 power exchange, you may start with the best of intentions, where, you lay it down in your contract if you have a contract. I don't necessarily believe in contracts. Because I think a power exchange is a fluid, dynamic, moving thing, and you can set down guidelines, but those need to be able to be changed and modified when things happen.
Sure.
So you can lay down the best of intentions of, okay, we're going to play every Friday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m., no matter what, and we're going to explore this, and then somebody gets sick.
Right.
Somebody gets a new job. Somebody gets a new boss, and all of a sudden, that can't change, or somebody's burnt out. Especially if you're a professional dom like we are, and you do have lifestyle as well. It's kind of like being a doctor or a lawyer or any other profession, where when you come home, it's really not the thing that you really want to do all the time.
Right.
You just want to get, have a bath and some tea or some champagne and get your feet rubbed.
And not be on the whole time.
Right.
Yeah.
What would you find is your most valuable asset as a professional dom?
I believe my most valuable asset is that not only am I'm very nurturing. I'm not the bitch Dom.
Right. That's okay. Neither mine.
First and foremost, I'm not the bitch Dom. I can be
Dom.
inspired to be bitchy, but I'm not the bitch Dom.
Right.
And I think, this has happened a lot with people that come to see me, is that they expect me to be a certain way, even though I have in no way put myself out there in that way.
Goes back to the fantasy in their head.
Right. But at the same time, they're pleasantly surprised because there is a side of me that wants to connect with them from the very first meeting that they have told me a lot of Doms don't want to do that. They don't care to.
They don't care to. No.
And obviously, chemistry plays a big part. And if I don't feel that I'm going to have chemistry with somebody during the screening process, of course, and that doesn't go beyond that. But if they do and I see them and nothing is clicking, then we're not really going to have the connection and I'm not going to see you again.
Correct.
But if I feel that there's potential, and even if I don't see that client again, I just find that I invest a lot of myself into the session and into the client as a person, as a submissive. And I just like to invest a lot of time into the craft and not coming off just as this person who's there just to make money. Obviously, we all like money, but that is not, the number one goal.
Right. I always tell my clients, those that I develop a bond with or I talk with, or even people that are discussing my career with me when they found, you're a dominatrix, and that must be fantastic. And I'm like, look, it's a lot of hard work.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah, and if I wanted to make a lot of money, I would have been a lawyer. Mm-hmm. I would have been a doctor.
Right.
There's many other professions, I could have gone in that would make me a lot more money. Mm-hmm. Not saying that, it hasn't provided me a decent living, because it has.
Sure.
But more so it's provided me a lot of great connections, freedom to control my own schedule, mm-hmm. the ability to see the world, meet great people, have them in my life. Money is not everything. And I think our society has become way too focused on money, especially in the current environment that we have going on.
Of course.
And it's just not about the money for me. It's about the quality.
Those connections that you make and the experiences that you have.
Yeah. Plus, we have the coolest office in the world.
We do.
And we get to wear the best uniforms.
We do. We do. I mean, anybody else looking in that hasn't a clue about what we do, they have their misconceptions, of course, about what we do, but they see us, most of my friends are very envious of how I live, how much I travel, who does what for me, that sort of thing. And those are all, I have to remind them, and also submissives that want to serve me, that are sitting back thinking, look at you, you're getting, you just have these expectations and these people opening doors for you and taking you out to dinner, all these little things. I'm like, well, yes, honey, that's what I work. That's like a side perk.
Right.
Of everything that I do, all the hard work that I put into it, that you have no idea exists.
I don't just snap my fingers
exactly.
and a submissive pops up right here, naked with a leash and collar on.
Self-employment means you're always working.
Always working. Always working,
always doing
on,
research, always reading. What is the best toy? What is the safest thing? Yeah.
Right. What for me, the one thing that I find is challenging right now is, because I have been doing it for such an extended time period. Sure. Is how do I engage with the clients I've seen for 15, 20 years in a new and refreshing way?
Sure.
Because even though, so they've been seeing me for a very long time, we've expanded their fetishes and they've grown into new things but there comes a point where it's like, okay, we've grown into these new things, they've moved up higher into, the fetishes. Mm-hmm. So you're into bondage. That's something, we've expanded in. How do we do it new?
Sure.
How do we keep it fresh and novel and engaging for not only them, but for me?
Sure.
Because I don't want to get stale. I don't want to get bored. And if it's the, 15,000th time that I've wrapped you in saran wrap.
Right.
I'm going to get incredibly bored unless I can think of a new way to wrap you in saran wrap.
Sure.
Which is why you'll see things like, Jack being made into candy corn.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
It's like, and I'm the kind of dom who, I tell people, I laugh, I joke. This is called play. Look up the definition of play and see what it means.
Exactly. It's supposed to be fun.
It can be ritualistic, it can be bloodletting, it can be serious, it can be heavy, but at the same time, it's supposed to be fun and enjoyable.
Yep.
And if it's not for either party, then there's some discussion that needs to happen.
Sure. There's a time and a place for everything. And obviously, there are scenes that have different tones, and you might want to be in some sort of strict kind of mood during a certain scenario. But yeah, at the end of the day, I'm always laughing, just like you. I joke with my clients. I have a good time. It's obvious. I probably smile too much.
I know, yeah. Stop smiling.
I can't hide the fun that I'm having while I'm beating the shit out of somebody.
Right.
I can't help it. Or crushing your balls.
Right. It's like, look at all the fun I'm having while I'm doing this.
Exactly. And I've been told by a lot of my regulars that is an aspect that they really enjoy. Yes. It pushes them, as I'm sure your boys do as well.
Yes.
So that's been.
They see how much we enjoy it.
Yeah,
and they want
in turn they want to give us more
because they know we're enjoying it.
Exactly.
I recently had a client, adorable gentleman. I love him to death. We are both sci-fi geeks, and he's just adorable. And he asked me halfway through our session. He goes, I have a question. I really don't want to offend you. And he goes, but I know that there are people out there who don't like this activity. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I don't do things I don't like.
Yep.
I don't.
Exactly.
I said, and you've seen me now for over a year. You should know that I enjoy what we're doing.
Right. Right.
He's like, I know. He goes, I'm just, self-conscious. And I'm like, I understand needing reinsurance. That's fine. But
that's why we have websites. And I tell each, that's why it's kind of annoying. The new process of how clients will approach DOMs is they don't even... That's a whole other topic, but they don't even go to your website.
We'll do it next.
And I always tell people, look on my list. If you're asking me what I enjoy, what I don't enjoy, look on my list. Everything that is on my website is something that I fully, completely enjoy. Mm-hmm. And if I'm just going to half-ass it, I'm not. It's not going to be on the list whatsoever. So
what do you do with those boys that come to see you or want to engage with you in a lifestyle or professional basis, and we've all had this question. Well, what would you like to explore? What would you like to engage in? What would you like to do? And the answer is whatever you want to do.
Right. I would really love to just go shopping for 3 hours on your credit card. And we can go eat, and we can have drinks, and and you can rub my feet the whole time.
Right.
That's what I would like to do.
Right.
So, I think...
Let's fly to Paris for the weekend.
Exactly.
Eat at all the good restaurants. Take me shopping for perfume.
There's all these rubber outfits I want. Right. So, let's do that. That's going to put a smile on my face.
Right.
So, now, do you really want to think about your question and come back to me?
You want to give me an answer that actually makes sense, or are we done here?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, it's, I get that. But the biggest turnoff is when somebody is willing to say, let's do whatever it is that you want, and they're not even kinky at all, but they just want to do it for me. Right. I want it to feel like it's an exchange. It is an exchange.
It is.
It has to be mutually beneficial. It has to be a scene that we both enjoy. And, it's okay if you're an enema fetishist and you want needles in your balls and all that stuff, but you don't want me to do sensory deprivation or something else that I really enjoy, or electrical play. It's fine, because there's going to be somebody else that enjoys that. So I want to enjoy what you also enjoy together.
Correct. Correct. And I think that's one thing that the submissives who are listening need to, pay attention to, is that even though we do all of these things and we have a wide array of fetishes we enjoy, just because I enjoy sticking, needles in people, it may not be your thing.
And you're not going to be disappointed.
And I'm not going to be disappointed if we don't engage in that, because you do have these other things, which are also things I enjoy, which we can do together and enjoy.
Exactly.
Now, do I enjoy pushing your boundaries and making you expand them, especially if you're going to serve me long term?
Right.
Then yes, you're going to try this, and we're going to see. And it may all of a sudden be where, wow, I can really do that.
I had no idea I liked it.
I had no idea I was going to enjoy it.
Right.
Or maybe, okay, that's definitely not on my list.
Exactly.
We're definitely crossing that off. And either one is fine.
And it's fun exploring those little things.
Yes. I've done that with Jack. And, and he's like, whatever man wants, that's great. And then he's like, okay, that was a no-no. That was.
I have to tell you a little story about a slave. He was actually my very first slave, probably 6 months in, he just came to me, I want to serve you. And we just jumped into this more or less kind of limited lifestyle scenario. But he was no limits because he wanted me to just have my way with him. He wanted to experience everything on his end. So didn't live in Chicago, so he would visit every 6 weeks or so. And on one of his visits, I said, you're going to meet me at the studio. We're going to a party. We're going to just jump right in. So he was all excited. He changed at the airport into his leather clothing and was just ready to go by the time he got to the studio. And what I didn't tell him was that it was actually a forced by video shoot. So he shows up and there's
awesome.
7 dominas and about three or four other submissive men. And 3 videographers. It's like, okay, I'm just going to stand here and just wait until you tell me what to do. So then I said, okay, this is what's going on. You're going to suck some dick tonight.
Right.
You're going to get your dick sucked and we're going to film it. And we're each going to sell it. So you're going to be out there. And
I'm using you and making money.
Exactly, because you're my limits slave.
Right.
And we, of course, had a long talk after everything was said and done. And he, at that point, decided, you know what? I thank you for the experience. I tried it. I've decided that this is not something that I ever want to do again.
Right.
So we had that conversation, and that's when we decided, okay, you do have limitations.
You do have limitations.
It is a little unrealistic to say, you know what? I'm no limits. You can do whatever the fuck you want to me. No, everybody has something.
Everyone has something.
Yeah.
And it may take you a while to find it.
And you might not even know.
You may not even know.
Case. Right.
And then when you go to do the activity, it's like, oh, that didn't work out the way I wanted it to.
Oops.
Yeah, we
Sorry.
won't be doing that again.
Exactly.
Right. So, and the other thing I find out is that, people, especially if you have a long-term client or long-term slave and over time, bodies change. I have clients who started with me and they were heavy into one thing, and after 10, 15 years of doing it regularly, their bodies can't handle it, or they have illness, they have sickness, they have age, and all of a sudden someone who is very heavy into pain is much more into bondage and foot worship because they can't process the pain. So you have to be willing to sit and discuss and say, okay, things have changed, this is where we are now. And I feel as a good dom, whether it's lifestyle or professional, you have to be willing to, in some ways, work with that.
Of course.
All right. I mean, yes, you could just say, okay, well, I can't beat the shit out of you anymore. I have no use for you. Fuck off. Get out of here. That to me is not the kind of dom that I am. I know that's out there, and that's great. But to me, that's demeaning the person who I have engaged with for a number of years. And want to have a connection with. It's like, all right, so you no longer cannot do heavy pain because you had hip surgery. Well, what else can we do? We enjoy each other. We enjoy each other's company. You're very good. You're dedicated. You're loyal.
Right.
So let's find out instead of me just tossing your ass to the curb. I don't like that attitude. That's just
I
think
agree.
It's bitch dom, and I think it's bitchy, and I'm like, it demeans the person who's served me for a number of years.
Yep, I agree, and I have had that experience where sickness and health have gotten in the way, and it's unfortunate when that does happen, because there's either the approach of, well, I can't be a heavy masochist anymore. I just physically can't handle that sort of pain when I'm dealing with all of this kind of pain. And they make the realization that either they aren't able to serve anymore, or they just can't serve in that way. So I'm not thankful that I've had that experience with certain submissives, but at least it's taught me to be a little bit more understanding about just where they're at and respecting that and understanding that they really, in their hearts, they still want to serve me. They still want to spend time with me, and I want to spend time with them. We just have to change things a little bit.
Or if they come to a crossroads, or you come to a crossroads where, it's not feasible for them to serve, or they've made a decision that it's not going to be part of their life anymore, because I've had people who have they've gone out of the BDSM, then you have to, have the respect to honor their opinion and their decision.
Exactly.
And, it's bothersome and it hurts. And one of the things that you and I talked about quickly, was how it is in this industry to develop a connection with someone, a client, and see them for a number of years and then just have them drop off the face of the earth. And you always wonder, are they okay? What happened? Was there sickness? And that's kind of thing that's built into this industry, is that you have to have the ability to process and say, okay, it's not personal.
Right.
It is the way of this industry. It's the way of our interactions. And you're always going to wonder about the client who disappeared after, 10 years. And
yeah, but there's really, there isn't much that you can do about it at that point. No. So
you and I have a lot of similar interests.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
Why don't you share for my listeners some of the things that you enjoy doing and why you enjoy doing them?
Well, like you, I'm a big medical fetishist. I've always had an interest in that. And it goes back to a long history of just being in and out of hospitals, my mother being in and out of hospitals. So my fetish for that stems from a long time ago, wanting to learn how to give injections. And I did give my mom injections because she was a diabetic. So just the whole process was a lot of fun. I'm a sadist. I don't, that's just always been there. So anything basically that can be under the umbrella of sadism, like medical fetishes, corporal punishment, I really enjoy. A lot of people don't like using the term suffering, but
okay. Why?
This is something that I've
you need to expound on that for me, because
that.
I like the word suffering.
I do too.
Especially if it's a submissive that's suffering.
Recently, and I think, the way that I'm defining suffering is that basically my submissive is willing to do, of course, what makes me happy, but what he is also asking for, and that is to have his limits pushed. So that does include painful suffering, not so much emotional suffering. So I think just, as long as you can define what kind of suffering you're talking about here.
Well, I think there's a difference between suffering and abuse.
Of course.
I mean, there's definitely, and it sounds like maybe the people who you're having that conversation with are
more so leaning on the side of
convoluting the term a little bit, and
exactly.
There's good suffering, and then there's bad suffering,
right?
And as long as it's a healthy, positive change or encounter for both parties,
right?
Even though the one may not always like it all the time, or maybe it may not be enjoyable at that time, but later it's a good experience.
Sure.
Which we all
but
encounter.
I'm not right. Abuse is when you are just ignoring what that person does or does not want, and you are basically doing things. It's a one-sided interaction at that point. So,
and that's a key point. I think of abuse is it's a very one-sided interaction. You don't care what the other person.
Exactly. So, that said, I love making people suffer.
Back to the question.
By way of CBT, I really, really enjoy. I've really gotten into electrical play as of the last couple of years.
And you're very good at it.
It's a lot of fun.
Yes, you're very good at it.
I love all these devices.
With my new violet wand. Yes. We had such fun with that.
Yeah.
Even though we shocked ourselves a few times.
as it does happen, yeah. But I think what I've been trying to do is every single year I set out to learn a new skill that is something that
which I admire very greatly in you.
Yeah, that I don't have the equipment for, that I'm going to just add to my repertoire and learn as much as I can about it. So the last couple of years ago, it was electrical, even though I've played with electrical 10 years ago when I started, but now I have my own gear. I'm expanding on it. I also enjoy sensory deprivation quite a bit. Like I said, corporal punishment. I've really gotten into slave training and protocol training.
One of my favorites.
As of the last 4 or 5 years. So I'm experiencing new things all the time and wanting to expand my limits and my repertoire. But first and foremost, I'm a sadist, and
given the name,
medical. Yes, exactly. Sadista is there for a reason.
Hint, give it a clue.
And a fetishist as well, of course.
Fetishism for me developed later.
Yeah.
In some ways, or I think when I started my career back in the 90s, fetishism wasn't as broad spread in our social media. We didn't have social media. We didn't have internet.
Sure.
So fetishism was a little bit more underground. It
Okay.
wasn't necessarily in our face as much as it is now with the leather fetishes and the latex fetishes.
Sure.
When I started, we didn't really have latex here. It was more overseas.
Okay.
I didn't own a pair of latex, or I didn't own a latex piece until the lady who I started with went to Europe and came back with damask pieces for all of us. So
Gotcha.
I've always been a leather dom. I'm
Mm-hmm.
still a leather dom. I love it. So I think that it started a little bit later for me, where I developed more of my sadism and my medical fetishism and my what I call physical activities first, and then discovered that, hey, I do have these fetishes, and I just didn't know they were fetishes.
Sure.
Like, I've always loved leather. I've always loved boots, even since I was like a teenager. High heels I've always worn. And I'm like, oh, so they're considered fetishes.
Right. See, I think that my fetishism tendencies go back to starting out as a performer from a performance background, where I performed on a stage. It wasn't theater, but it was, so it was a band. The guys played the music. The females did all sorts of fetishy S&M type performances.
Okay.
And from that, my love for rubber, leather, high heels, the costuming, all that sort of thing, that's where that stems from. And through that same course of time, I learned that I enjoyed very much how to do these S&M acts.
Okay, so you kind of came in the opposite way I did.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. To where first, I did learn a lot of things from being in the band. I learned how to flog somebody for the first time. We played with violent wands. We played with piercing, a lot of edge play, cutting stuff like that. And these were all with people that I had known for a very long time. I loved and trusted. So it was like essentially playing with my friends, which is one of the best things to do when you have friends that love that. But all of us as a collective, we were very big into costuming and rubber and the appearance of it.
What we used to call back then standing and modeling and how it looks as opposed to how it is.
Yes. Yeah. Only we were kind of doing a little bit of both at the same time.
Right.
But again, it was all for show. It was the theatrical aspect of it that I really
And then
enjoyed.
you just, hey, I really enjoy this.
Yes,
Let's explore it more.
I had a boyfriend at the time that I was in the band that was very, very kinky, very much a masochist and a bottom. And he introduced me to a lot of things that I had no idea existed, like sounding and, cutting with scalpels and wax play and, the more like heavier type. So with my experience with him, which, we didn't have vanilla sex.
Right.
We maybe had it a handful of times. The 2 years that we were together, it was mostly kinky, hardcore BDSM. I realized, wow, this is stuff that I really enjoy as it being a part of my personal life as well as on the stage. And that was an element that I didn't want to, after we broke up, I think I was still looking to fill that void when I moved to Chicago.
Because
I had it.
So you don't have it.
Right.
Makes complete
Now,
sense.
I moved to Chicago 13 years ago. I didn't know anybody, obviously. Somehow through the performance aspect, I met two professional dominas.
There you go. They do mesh very closely.
Yes.
There's a lot of crossover.
They do. And I was actually performing with them, and that was when I started forming those kind of relationships, those friendships, going to dungeon parties, starting to meet people. And it was one of those dominas that said, it's about time you do this professionally because you love it.
Same thing happened to me. You do this in your lifestyle already.
Yeah, there's no reason.
And I'm like, yep, same thing.
Yeah, but I had my hesitation was I loved doing those sort of things to people that I knew and had friendships with and cared about. And then all of a sudden to switch over to doing it with complete strangers was something that was hard to shift into.
It takes a while to shift that into your brain.
It took less time than I thought it was going to take. I quickly realized that it was just as exciting to play with a complete stranger, sometimes even more so exciting. So after I finally started doing it and I got past being nervous, I
Haven't looked back
decided.
since.
I haven't looked back since, and now
So
this
many
is just
lucky
how I'm going to be for the rest of my life.
Right.
So
even when I'm 60 and 70, I'm going to be tying up and hurting boys and
exactly.
And girls. Yeah.
Yep.
They'll
Have
see me
your
then, I'll
dungeon
see
of whatever
them then.
size at home, and
Yep.
yep.
It's not going to go away. It's part of who I am. I don't feel that I could go back to. I've never really done vanilla sex. My first boyfriend was 15, and I, hit his balls and spanked him, and yeah.
Yep, there's that too.
I think that everybody's kinky and has fetishes, no matter how engaged in it you are. But there are those of us that it just speaks to, and it's like a calling. And this is who I am. This is who I'm going to be, and I'm not going to change.
Exactly.
And if you like it, that's great. If you can't accept me, then I don't need you to have be part of my life.
Right.
Because I'm not asking you to change who you are. No. Why would you do the same thing to me?
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
You've been doing this now for 13 years?
10 years. 10 years.
On your 10-year anniversary,
I've been kinky since I was 19, but professionally, I've been doing this for 10 years.
Congratulations on your 10-year anniversary. Yay.
Thank you.
So, I would consider you, in my opinion, which means jack shit, a solid, good professional that's probably not going to go anywhere.
I'm not
Usually, going anywhere. I find the ladies who pass the 10-year mark tend to stay. Not always, but if you've done it for 10 years, you're really not going to go work at Starbucks.
Right.
Unless some
you
life
get
changes.
used to the life that you live, and it's very hard to want to go back unless there's. I mean, I have always wanted to do a couple other things that aren't, that are vanilla, but I'm really happy with what I'm doing right now. I feel like this was, like you said, my calling.
Right. I mean, if you've done it that long, then it's something you enjoy.
Yes. Right. Right.
So, for those doms that are just starting out, what would you give as a piece of advice?
There's a couple different answers to that question.
I love that question to other ladies because it's like I know what mine are.
There's a couple different answers to that question because I do get approached quite a bit, as most professionals do that have been doing this for a long time, and some of the people that approach me are friends that see aspects of, again, going back to, I see what you do all the time and you get to travel and people wait on you hand and foot, so they think that they can want to get into it because they want that.
Energy I put
exactly.
Into every one of my lifestyle relifeships takes a lot of dedication and a lot of time and daily, weekly communication.
Right. And that's lifestyle relationships. Not the business of being a professional. So kudos to you for managing all those different scenarios and environments.
Kudos to Mr. Ma'am as well.
Yes.
Who puts up with a lot of bullshit. So.
Yeah, but one of the first things that I tell people who approach me is, okay, do you realize how much work it takes? That it's a full-time job. And unless you are willing to sacrifice a lot of your time and yourself, and you're looking to make a quick buck, then this isn't a thing for you. Once I realize that they are serious and they are genuinely coming to me for information and they want to learn or they want me to mentor them, I say, okay, first, I want you to read all these books, do some research, go to classes. There's this and this and this kind of convention, DomCon, of course, and put the effort in first. Right. And at that point, once you see how sincere they are, I do have a tendency to want to help out DOMs, but I also realize that there are limitations that, obviously they're not paying me for me to help them. Right. So I try and...
They could.
They could. They won't.
Right. But I'm not going,
they probably won't.
And this is one thing I find very interesting in our profession is if you want to learn to be fill in the blank profession, you go find someone who's skilled at it, or you find a community college or a vocational school.
Exactly.
And you go to the program or the mentor or apprenticeship, and you pay to be in that program.
Right.
Learn your skill, and at the end of the program, you can say, I was X program certificate.
Right.
We do not have that. Unfortunately.
We don't. But there are, right, it's not structured, unfortunately. I mean, there are some new schools of domination that I've seen out there. And weekend intensives that you can take. So, once I do see that dominers are taking that route, kudos to them because they're putting in the effort. But I think most doms are not starting out when they are getting their feet wet, usually by attending a foot fetish party or attending, just something to where they feel what kind of attention that they're going to get and the kind of respect and all that stuff. So they're not completely realizing the background that it takes to get to that point. So it's kind of an illusion of what they see before they actually get into it.
And they realize, I actually have to learn.
And do a lot of reading, and do a lot of research, and make a ton of mistakes. And
exactly.
Hopefully through that process, I am willing to provide guidance and assistance.
My suggestion to them is pretty much the same as yours, but it also expands to the fact that if there is a lady who you admire and you want to learn a particular skill that she has, offer compensation.
Right.
Which
is exactly what I did with you.
Exactly.
And
offer compensation. Say, I would love to learn saline infusions, and I know this is your specialty.
Right.
You know how to do it. Can I do a training session with you for X amount of, apprenticeship fee? You're going to have to do the homework and put some energy and skill and time and money into learning how to do this profession.
Right.
You don't just pick up a whip, buy a cheap leather dress, and put an ad up on back page, which we don't do that anymore.
Right. We don't.
We don't do that anymore. So
yeah, a lot more time and preparation and effort goes into it than people expect. And also realizing, okay, well, so you are ready to put yourself out there. You are ready to have a web presence, even though you don't know X and Y about, what you want to do. But at least be honest with how you put yourself out there. I have medical play and saline infusions on my website, but I always recommend that I have somebody to help me with the saline infusions. Right. There's really nothing that I have on my website that I don't feel 100% doing either by myself or bringing somebody in.
Right.
But I'm not going to say, I know how to suspend you in shibari, rope bondage in this kind of position and this and that, because that's not my forte.
It's not my forte. Right.
Yeah.
Be honest with what your skill set is.
Yeah.
Be very honest with what your skill set is and with the style of domination you are. Like you and I both said, I'm not bitch dom. I do not excel at verbal humiliation. It is not where my brain goes. It's not how my brain processes. I'd rather find a position or something, kind of create a bondage or medical play to put you in.
Sure.
So be very honest and clear to those that come to you. Like, if you expect this, you're not going to get it here.
Right.
And I will recommend one of my girlfriends.
Exactly.
I'll say, okay, if you want X,
especially in Chicago, there's going to be somebody for everybody.
Yeah, I will say, if you don't like this, go to Alexandra, go to Xena, go to Maya. We have such a diverse plethora of doms that there is someone who will fit your fantasy or your interest.
Exactly.
Well, we do have to kind of wrap it up, so I want to ask a few really quick questions. So, what is the one thing that aggravates you with submissives?
The one thing, okay, let me narrow it down. When they don't listen.
Okay.
When they don't listen.
What is the one thing that will get your attention with a submissive? I know big dick's not the answer.
Big dick is not the answer. A dick pic is not the answer.
Dick pic is not the answer.
Honesty, communication, the ability to articulate and be able to communicate with me. That will make you stand out immediately.
What is your favorite toy?
Currently, my 4-point electrical ball crusher.
Which we didn't get to use this weekend.
I know.
Damn it, poor Jack. All right. So I want to thank you for taking the time
Thank
to
you.
chat with me on Femdom Mystique, and hopefully my listeners will enjoy it. If one of them would like to get in contact with you in regards to exploring a power exchange, how would they do so?
They can go to www.imyourfetish.com.
If they can't spell it, they don't need to be going, right?
Exactly. I know. I can't make it any easier than that. My email address is iamyourfetish@gmail.com. But yes, just go to my website. My travel information is on there because I tend to travel quite a bit. My phone number is on there. It's very easy to contact me. Advertisements and that sort of thing. Yes.
And if they want to find you on social media?
I am on Twitter as MS Alexandra S. I am on Instagram as Dominatrix Alexandra. I am on Facebook as Alexandra Sadista.
So just basically punch in your name.
Exactly, it's
and
very
you should
easy.
Come up if they want to.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, I am out there in any which way I can.
Well, I appreciate you being my guest, and we had a great time.
We did.
I really look forward to exploring and seeing your process in the next 10 years.
Yeah,
'Cause I'll be
absolutely.
the old lady of 70 going, So,
I'll be right by your side. Come on, Simone. Come on, we can do it.
we can do this. All right, listeners, this has been another installment of the Dom Interviews featuring my friend Alexandra Sadista at Femdom Mystique podcast. I will be doing some rants and some lifestyle power exchange topics coming up over the next few weeks. Look for them. They will be posted on my social media. And again, you can find me pretty much anywhere pushing in Mistress Simone or Chicago Mistress, all one word. Have a good kinky time.